Alrighty, so welcome to week 9 in computer concepts. Now come to me. All right, so week 9, okay, it's next week, but you get it, right? So what happens in week 9 around campus? Yeah, so typically there's a midterm, right? So yeah, screen, very good. So we don't have a midterm. I think I give enough work. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah, give enough work. All right, cool. So, but you need to know, and this is where you could do it, but yeah, perfect. So week 9, though, at the end of it is the last point you can drop this class. Okay, and what that means, well, let me ask this and show them. First, let's show them, number 3, and everybody wave. Yay. What does it mean, last date to drop? Okay, well, what does that mean? To get a W. If you want, at this point, to drop this class, come back, you need to drop before Friday, okay? What happens if you don't drop before Friday and you don't do the work? You get a letter grade based on your work, okay, which kind of tells you. Okay, any questions about that? So this is true, not just for my class, but for all of your classes, so I really want you all to know, okay? All right, so just an FYI too, DevFest, October 17th, coming up next weekend. And tonight, even though, again, it's in the future, Steve Wozniak, I'm so excited. I actually might get to meet him, which is awesome. So, I know, right? He was on Jimmy Fallon. Him and Seth Rogen were doing a little skit with, it was so funny. And they talked about binary. It's worth watching if you want to check it out. Okay, so our topic today is actually kind of a little bit of a conclusion from last week. And we talked about, matter of fact, who remembers? What did we talk about last week? Well, we didn't talk about Unicode. We talked about Apple. We talked about Xerox PARC. We talked about the big players, but the larger topic was what? No? The graphical user interface, the PC, and the operating systems, right? Yeah, who made them and how they came to be. But here's what I really want you to walk away with in addition to all that, is that we live in pretty amazing times, right? I mean, really, I had an online student come in and talk to me, and he was so jazzed about kind of where technology is right now. As a matter of fact, did anybody see what Microsoft released this week? It's called Project X-Ray. And I can't show it in here because YouTube would throw my copyright thing, but it's worth watching, and it's a HoloLens that allows you to do gameplay where you're actually in a room and you're shooting things that you see. It's phenomenal. So let me just show you the website if you want to go check it out. It's Microsoft, and it's called Project X-Ray, and it's basically a continuation of what they've been talking about for a little while. And here's an image from that. And again, I can't play the video because they'll flag me. But so here's the idea, is that this guy has some HoloLens on. He is playing, and all of these assets or these images are digital. And it's amazing when you watch it. So it's worth watching that particular video, but it's pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. So Sarah's asking, can he see the room? Yeah, and we call this augmented. Let's go ahead and put that on our notes. Augmented reality. Okay, so we're augmenting reality with a digital overlay. That's pretty phenomenal, right? Think about the graphical user interface coming from the command line, going to touch, ultimately going to this, and then possibly in our lifetimes into where our brains could control computers. Trips me out every time I think about it. Yeah, so gaming is really pushing. There's 2 things that they talk about pushing the computer industry forward. Gaming's one. The other one's kind of sad. Guess what it is? Porn. I tell you again, it's sad, but it's true because porn often tests the boundaries of payments, network availability. I could go on and on. That's not the point of my slide. So sorry, okay? So sorry. But here's what I really want you to get. all the stuff we talked about, last week, as far as, not all of it, but most of it was related to the idea that somebody wrote an operating system, right? The first person that wrote the graphical was who? Xerox, not Exxon, that's okay. Xerox, and Apple got it from them, and Microsoft got it from them. But ultimately, all this stuff comes down to that you write source code. Programmers write source code that is then converted into binary. So this is why I find it really important for you all to walk away with an understanding of binary in this class, because everything comes down to source code ultimately being put into binary. Okay? By the way, are you all writing source code yet? Yeah, HTML and CSS is the beginnings of programming, but still is considered source code. Now the question would be, what takes the HTML and CSS and converts it into binary? Any guesses on that? The browser. The browser itself will take the code that you wrote and convert it into zeros and ones so the computer can display it back. Now you don't see the zeros and ones, right? You could if you had the right kind of application or the right kind of utility, but it is not what you see. What happens is that source code gets converted and then rendered back into the browser. So I kind of want to talk about, actually this is what I wanted to talk about before I went there. You know, we're going to learn 2 languages in this class. Anybody remember what 2 languages we're going to learn in this class? This is not HTML and CSS. No. JavaScript and, I said it last week, you might remember? Visual Basic, which comes from what? Regular Basic, which was written by Bill Gates. Okay? Well, there's this fun little website called 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. And what it does is it lists, very good, this is where you could just show the screen. It just lists a lot of different languages. Look at this, 1,500 different languages implementing 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. You know the song, right? 99 bottles of beer on the wall, take one down, pass. Visual Basic. Yeah, pass it around. So what's kind of fun in here is you could come in here and look at all the different ways or the different languages have implemented it. So if I searched for JavaScript, we could look at, right, that here is 3 different implementations of JavaScript doing 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So here is the code, right? So here's the source code that would generate that. And you may first look at this and think, oh my God, right? Because this may seem like at the beginning's another language, but really it is fairly readable. Because if you say if, and confirm is if you're old enough to read about beer in the community, then hit OK, and then it shows you the output. Now, by the way, my plans was to run this in front of you today. I did this in the other class, and when I ran the code, it knocked out my screen for the recording. Like, I have to figure out why, and I haven't, but I thought it'd be at least interesting to show you. Here's the actual code for that in an editor. Now, here's a suggestion I'm going to make. When we start JavaScript in the couple weeks from now, when you're writing JavaScript, I actually recommend you get an editor, and there's a free one. It's called Sublime Text. It's a free one. It's one of the best out there. And what do you notice about this code, just looking at it, versus this code? Yeah. So what do you think the colors do in this case? Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically helping you, right? So if you wrote document.write, which, by the way, what do you think document.write would do, just by the words? Huh? Create output to the page. Write something to the document. So if you wrote document wrong, it would highlight that. Code Academy's not going to do that. Okay? So, in your notes, what am I recommending when we start in JavaScript in a couple weeks? Yeah, get an editor. Get Sublime Text. It's just a good thing to know, okay? Yeah, WebStorm's a higher end, a more professional level. Sublime Text is what most people, when they start, do it. Huh? No, free. Totally free. Yeah, totally free. Well, the Sublime Text is free. You can purchase it for higher end features, but the beginning is there's a free version, okay? All right, so again, everything comes down to what for the computer to run it? Source, no, the source files is what people write. Binary is what the computer understands, okay? So I really wanted to also kind of contextualize some of the operating system ideas. And this is one of the ways we talk about it, which is, and put this in your notes, the cake layer. The cake layer is a really important thing because it helps us understand kind of what happens, right? So there's a hardware layer, right? If you were building new hardware, what kind of profession would you have? Anybody know? Engineer, exactly. And if you're creating an operating system, what kind of profession would you have? Would have but software engineer. If you're creating apps, what kind of profession would you have? Software, but we call those developers. Okay? So engineers, computer engineers, what do we say here? Software engineers, and application would be developers. Now, at the user level, that's you and I interacting with this stuff. There actually is another profession that is becoming really well known, and it's called a UI UX. So the user experience. As a matter of fact, have you ever had that experience where you've opened up an app and it's just so enjoyable to use? Anybody had that experience lately? I have. I'm using a new app called Peak to help increase my brain power, and every day I play and it's just wonderful. It's like this wonderful experience. So somebody thought about the user experience. Now, you ever had an app where you don't ever want to look at it again? Yeah, many of them because somebody didn't think about the user experience, okay? So Minecraft is really popular, but its interface is not that great, but people love it, especially young people love it. Okay, so this is an article that I've linked in my presentation. And by the way, this is Windows Vista. Anybody know this guy? Steve Ballmer. We didn't talk about him last week. He was actually another one of the key players. And by the way, he's demonstrating Windows Vista, so who do you think he works for? Microsoft. He was one of the first 3 that dropped out of Harvard to go start Microsoft. And when Bill Gates left, which by the way, why did Bill Gates leave Microsoft? Does anybody know? Yeah, actually here's what happened. Him and his wife, Melinda, basically had enough money that the interest on their money, they could give away the rest of their lives. Just the interest on their money, they could spend the rest of their lives giving it away. They're working on third world disease issues. I mean, they're really becoming, a more conscious folk. So an operating system. So really what we talk about when we talk about operating systems are these key pieces right here. And the cake layer is the beginning to understand this, but this is a better depiction of this. So at the bottom layer, there's the hardware. And then we have the CPU management, right? So we have to have something that manages that CPU. The operating system is what does that. And then on top of that is memory management, okay? So how much, like if you start to run out, and who's a guy from Harvard? Malin started talking about this. What happens if you run low on memory? Anybody remember in a computer, what does it do? It slows down, but it also tries to do virtual memory out of your hard drive. So this is part of your memory management. Who knows what a device driver is? What is a device driver? Yeah, so it's software that helps you interact with hardware. Most of the times it is a printer or some kind of external storage device. I/O management is that important piece of managing the I/O. And then of course at the top of this is really the applications. So let me ask you if you got this. So if I'm doing this on my computer, am I interacting with what layer of the cake? Okay, the GUI, but remember the cake is hardware, operating system, application, and user. So I'm the user, in this case, interacting with the, okay, not the applications yet. Yeah, this is the operating system right here, okay? I'm not in the apps yet. I'm in the operating system, okay? So let's say I want to type Word. Now what am I interacting with? Still the operating system. Because all I've done is I've asked the operating system to show me what matches the search that I've entered. I'm still at the operating system. So when I go up here and I click, now I am at the application layer. Okay? But I'm still the user, right? And when I touch the hardware, in a sense, in one of the lecture I gave, actually, the students were a little confused because they're like, well, wait a minute. You're the user interacting with the hardware. Okay, this could be circular. This is really talking about the internal systems, okay? So some of the most common things that you do as a user, right, are what? As a user in the operating system without the apps yet, what are the most common things you do? You might know? Yeah, because you don't think about it much, right? You don't think about the operating system much, but it's there. A very common thing is what I just showed, where you search. The other common thing is you look at the computer and you look at the files, okay? I'm going to show you a little something a little deeper. It's called MS-config, at least on Windows. So put this in your notes. So one of the things, how many of you have been in MS-config? Yeah, so if you haven't, for Windows users, and by the way, there's kind of an equivalent on Mac, and basically it says when you start up, and we're going to talk about the boot in a second, here are the things that you need to be doing. So when you boot, right, so it gives you selective boots, and it's called, if you didn't get it, MS-config in your notes. It says the default operating system. Look at all this. Look at all of these services. Exactly. One of the first things I do when somebody tells me their computer is slow is that I come in here and I turn off every service. I reboot the computer, I get some messages, and then I tell them, okay, try to do what you want to do. And almost every time they're like, oh my God, it's so much faster. And why is that? Because unbeknownst to many of us, there's a lot of stuff running in the background. Every time you load a new app, something is taking up some of your resources, and in this case, your RAM. And, you know, this is a great image right here. I'm going to show you this image right here because I was looking at this. And Malin's, and this, we talk about multitasking, so when you have multiple cores, it's always, you know, manipulating and trying to figure out how to efficiently run things. But ultimately, this is what's happening right here, right? So when I was talking about virtual memory, here's your hard drive, right? And then what's happening is here's your RAM, so there's a nice bandwidth or, you know, transfer between here. Then there's your cache, and then there's your CPU. So this is the fastest thing, but it's the slowest thing as far as getting things to it. So having understanding of this helps you keep your computer clean, because the less things that take up this, the faster your overall computer. Yeah, good. That traffic jam's a perfect analogy, right? So we got too many things happening. That's right. So what's the suggestion? At least look at what's in MS-config to have your operating system do the most efficient job it can do for you, because many of us just get frustrated. And with Windows, I reload it once a year just because I forget the stuff I load. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good question. How do you figure out which one you need? Here's what I do with users when I go to their house and they want me to do stuff with their computer. I turn everything off, and I tell them in the next 5 days, if there is something you can't do, let's talk about what that is, and we go through and figure out what that is and just turn it back on. Because it's not as if when you turn it off, it goes away, okay? It's still there. But at least you start with the let's turn everything off unless I absolutely need it. And there are some stuff that you may not even understand that you need, like BitLocker, right? So if you're somebody that is your information is critical to be encrypted. By the way, who knows what encryption means? What does it mean, Jake?
Well, in more like physical term, like if you were to scramble up all of your letters in a note, people could read it, but you would not decipher it.
Yeah. Do you ever notice when you're at a website and it says HTTPS? That's an encrypted conversation between the system that I'm on and Google. And if I'm on a website that doesn't have HTTPS, that means it's not encrypted. That means pretty much anyone can figure out what me and that site are doing. So you need to make sure you understand encryption is a way to guard your personal data. The higher level of encryption sometimes is slower, but the more secure you are. Okay, so I know we kind of went off the rails a little bit, but I think it's important to understand what your operating system is doing for you, right? And ultimately that this stuff comes down to binary. Did we answer all the questions in the room? So the other thing, the last thing I want to leave, because we're actually, in addition to the lecture, you have 2 videos you're going to watch this week, what I'll talk about in a minute. I just want to make sure you understand this term, because many people have heard it, but very few people understand it. How many have heard booting? The computer's booting. Okay, of all those, who understands what it means? Okay. Anybody want to give it a shot? You want to give it a shot? I don't care. Yeah, absolutely. So when a computer is completely turned off, where does the operating system live? On the hard drive. In order to get the operating system into the RAM, and now not the whole thing goes, but just a part of it, often called the kernel, but there are other ways to talk about it, it has to get loaded. In order for it to load, there's this other little operating system called BIOS, Basic Input Output System, and it's on a chip. It's called firmware. I know I'm throwing a lot of terms today, but firmware is basically software and kept into hardware. Because the operating system is not on firmware, we can change it and modify it. So once that BIOS system says, hey, is my keyboard, is my RAM, is everything ready to go, then it says, okay, identify the boot device. What is going to be the thing we're going to load the operating system from? And then it loads it. What can go wrong here? Stuff we've already talked about. What else can go wrong here is something happens to your operating system and it will not boot. That's a bad outcome. Sad. Now, it's fixable sometimes depending on what causes. Matter of fact, it used to be that the BIOS, there was another chip that kept the date and time. That's not as much of an issue anymore. Let me just say this. Is this different for a mobile phone? Same concept. Same concept, except that it's almost all firmware. Okay? All right. So booting is the process of going from taking the operating system from the hard drive and putting it in where? The RAM. Very good. Okay? Yeah, question. Yeah, it's a separate chip. How many of you know about Y2K? Why did we have a Y2K issue with computers?
People thought that since we were going back to another zero, it was going to throw everything off because people thought like we didn't like, especially with the banking. Yeah, we didn't have protocols for a new year.
Close. When we first started building software, hardware was really, really expensive. So when programmers had a variable that set date, it was really a big difference between 2 digits and 4. So they said, we'll just use 2 digits because by the time we get to the year 2000, nobody will need this software anymore. Crazy, because what happened was everybody just kept building software on top of software on top of software. And it was called legacy systems. So when we got to the year 2000 or close to it, people started freaking out, right? They're like, oh my God, everything's going to die. Oh, this was a golden time for me, because for computer people, what happened? They hired us. Money, 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 money. I went out and did consulting for a year. Happy. Okay. But what they did is they hired us because they didn't know how to fix it, and the fix was relatively easy depending on what the legacy system was. The longer software had been in development and not updated, the harder it was to do, but a lot of computers just had to have chips updated and other things. I'm not going to tell you how old I was. So yeah, this was part of the chip thing, but also there's a little battery inside all computers that keep that date and time. Yeah, and anymore it's a solid state, so it doesn't need the kind of power it used to. Okay, so I want to just that's kind of what I just wanted to complete with you about the whole operating system and at least talk about that. Here's my kind of thinking about what we're going to do in the coming weeks as far as classwork, because I'm planning out from here to the end of the semester, okay? Next week, you're going to have a hands-on classwork. I'm going to walk you through, and I'll have a pre-record. I started working on it today. And for those of you that have taken my 12, you did this, but we're going to do it a little more advanced. It's a my grade spreadsheet. Because here's the question I start getting about this time of the semester. Rio, what do I need to get this grade in your class? Okay? I've already gotten it, actually. So from now on, when you ask me this, I'm going to say the my grade spreadsheet will tell you that. Because if you've ever wondered how that grade gets calculated in Blackboard, I'm going to show you how to create a spreadsheet that does that same thing. And you can ask the all-important what-if questions. So spreadsheets ask what-if questions. So in your notes, spreadsheet, again, the killer app, right? We talked about the killer app last week. So the week after that, and these are tentative, but I think this will hopefully make this, we're going to start talking about networking. What an important part of our class to talk about networking. Think about it for a minute. How useful is your computer if you disconnect it from the internet or your phone? How useful is it? Practically a bucket of, okay, I won't say that. It's a really big calculator, right, that you can play games on, and you can do Word, but at that point, what else, right? So we're going to talk about networking for a couple weeks. We're going to have the Visual Basic stuff do classwork, and then we will have a week on social networking, a really fun topic. We will have a week on databases, privacy, and then we'll end on week 17 with the My Planned grade. And the idea here is that we'll take that grade, that spreadsheet we did in week 10, and you can figure out how to end up where you want to be in this class. So really important stuff that we're going to do. Okay? Just kind of wanted to map it out so you knew where we were heading. All right, so in your notes, you have two things to do in addition to the notes. You have to do a video about fair use. Okay, fair use, because we're all going to start creating videos next week, right? And you're going to need to include material, and most of the time I'm going to tell you it's easier if you just create your own, but you can use other people's, and YouTube will give you some royalty-free stuff. But let me just say this. If you're recording video, is there a difference between recording it like this and like this? Yeah. And how should you record it? Why? Because YouTube, right? Remember this, right? So the answer is aspect ratio, okay? So YouTube, and by the way, monitors and TVs, right? They are wider than they are longer, height and width. So if you're doing it like this, and you ever notice this when you're watching videos, when people do it like that, they have it all blurred out? Because if they stretch it out, it distorts it. So if you're doing your own clips, which I recommend for the video, do it like, and by the way, how many have noticed now the phones try to tell you, right? My phone does. If I'm recording a video, it'll actually give me a little overlay. This is, oh, turn your phone, dummy. It doesn't say that, but it kind of says that, right? Right. Oh, good. Yeah. Mine doesn't. It'll turn the other way. So here's the deal. I want you to at least know about copyright because as I've told you all, I broke it. I know it's true. YouTube will ban you. They didn't ban me, they just limited me to 15 minutes and I'm out of purgatory now, so I'm very happy. You may not be because the videos are longer, but I want you to understand what fair use is. Because YouTube has a way to talk about this, and then this video actually kind of takes what YouTube says and it helps you understand it at a deeper level. Because you can. As a matter of fact, how many of you have seen these videos where they do mashups and they take popular movies and they remix them? How do they do that? They do that through fair use. Okay, and I want you to understand these concepts. So in addition to the notes, you watch what first? Fair use. Second, you're going to watch DARPA. DARPA Dan. DARPA Dan, nobody's safe on the internet. This was aired a couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes. This guy I knew about already, but I did not know he was working for the government. And he is a geek. He is a geek's geek, this guy. Okay, you can tell by watching him. Okay, he's a video game creator and player. And the government hired him. And he's one of the top security folks in the nation. But guess what they said at the very end of the video? He no longer works for them. Guess who he now works for? Google. Google hired him away. Well, he's not cheap. He's not cheap, okay? All right, any questions? So you're going to watch the fair use and you're going to watch DARPA Dan. And by the way, make sure you do headings on those. Okay?
So the links are going to be.
The links will be in classwork, which I will have up as soon as I get this video genned. You have to watch them and take notes on them. Yeah. Always take notes, right? Okay, questions? No? Did you get something from today? Yeah?
When you said make a video about fair use, would that be a second video?
No, you're not making a use. That video helps you understand fair use. Well, you are going to make a video in week 10.
No, because you said you're going to make a video on fair use, and I'm like, wait a minute, we didn't do it the first week.
I didn't think I said make one. I could have. That could have come out of my mouth. Yeah. Okay, sorry. My bad. Okay. Sue me. No, don't. I'm just joking. Don't sue me. All right. Yeah, don't put me on purgatory. Let's show them and say goodbye. Adios.